Welcome to The Art of Medicine, the program that explores the arts, business, and clinical aspects of the practice of medicine. Today, we're going to do something a little different. My friend John Jurica, who has his own very successful podcast, is interviewing me. And so John will be the interviewer and I will be the interviewee, and we're going to talk about locum tenens. So I hope you enjoy it.
Hello, everyone. This is John Jurica again here on the Non-Clinical Career Academy, and I am so happy to have my guest today, Andrew Wilner, Dr. Andrew Wilner, internist, neurologist, epileptologist, but really for our purposes, writer, author, and experienced in locum tenens. So I brought him here today because of the book, The Locum Life, which we're going to talk about. It's all in here, and we're going to only scratch the surface, but it's going to be fun, and we're going to learn a lot. So, Andrew, thank you for being with me today.
Oh, thank you, John. It's a pleasure to see you again.
We did have a chance to talk before. We've known each other for a while. I was thinking how we met, and I forgot how we met, but I think we were introduced by Heidi Moad, actually, as I think back, and you've been on the podcast, and I think we talked about the book then, but I found that there's more and more interest in locum tenens, and so I really wanted to take a deep dive into this topic with an expert like yourself, so I'm really glad that you're here. All right, then, we are going to get right into it. This is almost like, the first question is sort of, I don't know. I wanted to know what the locum life is. So not only like what the locum life itself is, but and then why it's the title of your book. So maybe we can cover that in the first start of this.
Okay. So first of all, locum tenens, it's surprising, it's a Latin term. A locum is place, tenens is like tenacity, like hanging on to something.
Cool.
And most people have no idea what it means. You talk to, meet somebody on the plane. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a locum tenens doctor. It's like just blank. So, yeah. And it is hard to explain, but it refers to someone who is temporarily replacing someone else, particularly physicians and clergy.
Okay.
So, and I think a simpler explanation, which everyone can relate to, it's like a substitute teacher. Your teacher's on sick leave. We all remember, your teacher disappears. I don't know, he's having a baby or something. And this strange person shows up for a week or 2 weeks and tries to hold down the fort. And then the teacher comes back. So that's really a locum's physician has no home, no permanent position, and just goes from one job to the other. Now, a caveat is there are physicians who do have permanent positions who also work temporary positions in their free time. So you can do that as well. But many locums, that is their career. They have a series of temporary positions. And so the locum life is someone who is a independent contractor. And I did this for many years. You work out your schedule. You say, I want to work from January to June. So you line up your locums jobs, but I don't want to work from July to September because I want to go to the Philippines and visit my wife's family and go scuba diving. You don't have to get permission from anybody. There's no formal request. There's no one to balance call with. There's no concern about dumping your, responsibilities on a colleague. You are only responsible to yourself because each locum contract is freestanding, independent, and not dependent on anything that came before or anything that comes after. So that's the locum life.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, that's helpful. That's really helpful. But I think you're going to talk about different stages of locums later. And so the life might look different for each, but we're not going to get to that yet. So, okay, so, there's a lot of things even right there because you talk about being an independent contractor. So that has its whole set of requirements, but maybe we'll get into that as we move along. So, okay, so, and the book, The Locum Life, is a book about that life and how to navigate that the best way is, from what I understand. I read the book several times actually. So What was the purpose of the book?
Yeah, well, let me. Well, first of all, I'm a writer. I'd already written 3 books, and I was looking for another book to write. And, as a writer, you have to ask yourself, what do I know something about that I could
Hmm.
write about? And I
Yeah.
realized that my first locums position was 1982. And then I realized, but I haven't worked locums continuously. I've had permanent positions and then locums and then permanent positions and then locums. And then I realized that locums is a tool that you can use at various stages of your career as your needs change. And then there was this whole explosion of burnout, which you're well familiar with, and hordes of physicians wanting to leave medicine, seeking non-clinical careers. And I just thought this was so sad, that
Yeah.
here are these well-trained people who really loved what they did and want to do it but can't. And I thought, locums is a way for it worked for me to balance my outside interests, my personal life, with maintaining my identity and role and income as a physician. And I realized that other doctors might not even be aware that this option is open to them. And I think I was right because I wrote the book. And so I methodically went through sort of what you have to do and the pros and the cons and, techniques, and then running your own business and travel and all the things that are part of the locum life. And the reception was far greater than I anticipated. People say, this could really work for me.
Hmm.
So I was really pleased to write the book. But I think the motivation came from it was something that was about my own experience. But then I realized that it's a way for physicians to to have another option that's still clinical, because I mean, non-clinical careers I think are great if that's what you want to do, but you couldn't pay me enough to become a hospital administrator. I mean, there's
Right.
no number that would get me to that office, that C-suite. And so I work very hard every day to it reminds me when I was a teenager, my father was a CPA and also an attorney, and he encouraged me and my 2 brothers to come to the office and maybe go into that business, and it would have been a great deal because he was very successful and widely respected. And both of my brothers are kind of geniuses in math and science, and but I loved biology and the humanities, and the thought of going to the CPA office and dealing with numbers, about money that had sort of no intrinsic physiologic biologic meaning, existentially to me it was just money. That really drove me into medicine. It's
Hmm.
like, if I don't succeed and get into medical school, I'm going to have to work for dad. And it's like, oh no. So I think locums is a way to avoid the C-suite if you still want to be a physician, and really have patient contact, even if it's just through Zoom these days. But
Yeah.
if you want that doctor to patient relationship, that is absent from a lot of non-clinical careers. Although there are many exciting non-clinical careers for sure, and you can do all 3.
Well, as I've been learning about non-clinical careers, then I realize there's all these non-traditional careers, which this falls into, for me, and telemedicine and cash-based businesses and other things, but you're still interacting with patients. It maybe gives you more freedom, like you said,
Right.
more choices, more control.
Well, I listened to your program this morning with Dr. Maida, who has a cash functional medicine business where she takes care of patients, and she's sort of
Right.
maximized all the things she loves and diminished all the things she didn't like about her family practice. So I think it does take a lot of initiative, I think, to carve out that niche that works for you. But I think locums is an important tool that any physician who's not sort of 100% satisfied with what they're doing ought to consider.
All right, so you've kind of sold me on the whole idea of locums, and we're going to get into the real specifics of how you go through the process of preparing and actually finding your jobs and so forth. But maybe we should talk a little bit about, so what are the common negatives that one encounters? I mean, things that people might want to know ahead of time, say, well, that's kind of a showstopper for me. I really don't want to do that. So maybe just throw a little bit of a rain on the parade and tell me what some of the negatives might be.
Well, I think that's very important. I wrote a whole chapter on the negatives, and depending on your personality, they might be showstoppers. Uh, let's see where to start. So, um, well, first of all, you are self employed. So that has a lot of responsibility. You have to find your position. You have to budget your taxes, pay quarterly taxes.
Mm-hmm.
You have no paid vacation time. You have no paid sick time. You have no paid pension money. It's all on you.
Okay.
You are the scheduler. You got to find your jobs. You got to show up for your jobs. You got to negotiate your salary. So if you're just the kind of person that's like, well, I just like going to work and I get a paycheck, that is not going to work for you. Okay. The other negative is continuity. As I said earlier, each contract, which is very simple, by the way, it just says, I'm going to show up and I'm going to work for 60 days and I'm going to do that. And everybody said, and this is what I'm going to get paid. And they say, yes, yes, yes. And that's it. You don't need an attorney for a locums contract. And they can be broken, 30 days notice. So let me get to that. So from each job stands on its own. So say I'm working in Minnesota now until July 1. Okay, so what am I going to do on July 2? Well, that's up to me. So either I'm going to plan a vacation or I have to negotiate with a staffing agency to help me find a job, or I know somebody who's going to hire me. So I've got to set that. So you always got to be 6 months ahead of where you are, so you don't have a gap. Now, you may want that gap, and that's fine. But if you don't want that gap, then you don't want to have a gap that you don't want. And the other thing that happens is cancellation. Either party on these contracts can cancel within 30 days of the start date. And that's happened to me twice. Oh, I'm going to go work. And I mentioned Minnesota because I worked there a couple times on September 1. Okay, great. And August 15, I get an email. Your thing has been postponed till October 1 because credentialing isn't done. It's like, well, that's a whole month of income gone. What am I supposed to do? Twiddle my thumbs for a month? So I have a writing career. So the flip side is, oh, great, I've got another month to write, but I got to make sure I got another month of money in the bank also to tide me over. So the other negative is credentialing. You know, we still live in this primitive system where you're working, you know, for 20 years at a hospital, everything's great, they've checked your background. You say, you know, I'd like to work at that other hospital across the street. You got to file paperwork. I'm still waiting for my VA approval, which I started in August of 2018.
Wow.
So it's been more than a year waiting for credentialing. And I'll mention, just by pure luck, I have no malpractice history. I mean, there's no obstacle to overcome. It is pure bureaucracy. So every time you get a new position, you got to file paperwork and your photo and your passport and your fingerprints and all this stuff. And it's got to go to that particular hospital. And they have to go through it all and say yes. And if it's in a new state, oh my God, you got to do the whole thing again. And that can take 6 months or even longer to get a state license, even though you're licensed in the state. You know, like I'm from Rhode Island. So even though you're licensed in Rhode Island, getting a Massachusetts license, it's like from you're in the moon. Doesn't matter. It's a whole separate thing. They don't accept any of the information. They want to know where you went to college and the diplomas and notarize this. And of course, there is now the Interstate Compact that I'm sure your listeners have heard about, which is about half the states in the country are using it, which facilitates part of this at a fee of over $700, I think, so
Mm.
that you don't have to file everything again, and it kind of expedites the process. But you still have to get the new license, so you still have to carry new licenses, pays the
Right.
fees. I'm a big fan of a single federal license, long overdue.
Hmm. It seems
Uh,
like that's come up quite a bit lately. We happen to be at the time of this recording still in the middle of this COVID thing, and they put a lot of things in place, I guess, to mitigate that. But definitely, it's been a problem forever.
Right. And I think we'll talk about COVID more, but it's amazing that overnight it's like, okay, just forget the interstate licensing thing. You're a licensed, just go work there. I mean, the whole thing has been an artificial, bureaucratic,
Right.
self-serving program for each state. So they have their own little fiefdom, and it just got blown away in a second, by the federal government. And it's like, what's the
True.
harm? None. It's just something that doesn't need to exist, but it's the bane of the existence for the locum tenens. So a lot of
Yeah.
locum doctors pick a few states,
Yeah.
get your licenses, and look for options. So I think those are the being away from home, right? A lot of times
If
there's
yeah.
travel, so that's a plus or minus. A lot of people, well, I want the travel, but if you have a family back home, you're going to be away, you're going to come back.
Hmm.
So that can be a negative. Some doctors they miss their pets. They got to leave their pets at home.
Or they got to board them or something. Yeah.
And you're living in a hotel room. I've lived in a hotel room for weeks and weeks. But anywhere I have my laptop is kind of my office. So for me, I'm kind
Yeah.
of used to that. You go to the gym, I work on some writing, and then it's the next day already. So for me, it was. But some people. So I think those are the big highlights of the negatives.
Okay. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I think it ties into what you're saying now, and that is, what can you do to mitigate those, and or what do you do to prepare if you're thinking about going into locums? Maybe it all kind of ties together.
Right. Well, also I want to get to the positives also at some
Oh, we'll
point.
get okay.
All right.
Let's
And
do the mitigation first, and then we'll go to the positives of being a locums.
so you have to be a planner. I mean, I talked to, I have a video series and I interviewed a locum agent. She's been an agent for 8 years. And so there's actually 2 episodes because we talked for over an hour. And one of the questions I asked her was, well, how do I get a good assignment? And she had a very good answer. She said, well, you have to define what a good assignment is for you. So for some physicians, a good assignment is, I don't care about anything else. I want the highest hourly wage that I can get.
Mm,
That's a good assignment for me. When I
mm,
go, I want to come back. I want to see money in the bank. Other people may say, well, I want a hospital that's a little bit sleepy. I really don't want to be killing myself every day. And there are many assignments like that. There are lots of sleepy hospitals out there that need somebody, who's better than nobody. But
right.
you're not going to work your fingers to the bone, and that can be very nice. Or I want to be in Florida in the winter.
Okay. Good
That
one. Yeah.
geography really counts for me. Or
Hmm.
I want to be in a rural area where I can bring my family and I have weekends off. So what a good assignment is really is somewhat individual. For me, I didn't care where I went. I don't care. Send me to the moon, send me to Alaska. I want to see money in the bank when I'm done. And because I'm going there to work.
Hmm.
And also, I want to be in a teaching hospital if possible, so I'm not just a slogger. And I was able to do that actually several times, and it was great. So plan what is the assignment, and then I would suggest establishing yourself with a staffing agency. Most new physicians to locum tenens work with a staffing agency. After you have some experience and you start your own network, you can contract directly with a hospital or a clinic. I would, unless you're really savvy, I would avoid that for your first assignment because there's
Okay.
malpractice issues you got to deal with. There's what happens if they don't pay issues you have to
Mhm.
deal with. What happens if they change their mind? What happens if the administrator you signed on with suddenly he transfers to somewhere else?
Right.
So the agency, although they do take a cut, they're really a barrier and they protect you
Okay.
from a lot of those things. And sometimes, even though they take a cut, they actually charge the hospital more. So
Oh,
sometimes
really?
you end up with the same amount. Things are very fluid in the locum tenens industry. So just because somebody's taking a cut doesn't mean you get less. One and one
Yeah.
doesn't always add up to two.
It's
In
probably
the
as much
world.
an issue of supply and demand, I suppose, too. I mean, if someone's
Oh
desperate, they're
yes.
going to pay more.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I would suggest, and when you work with an agent, they'll ask you all these questions and trying to feel out, what you want to do.
Hmm.
Then you have to send some credentialing information to them.
Right.
They want to make sure that you're a solid candidate. So that takes a while. So you can get, and then, well, which state do you want to be in? If you know you want to be in Wyoming, which is a great state to go because they have a big need and it's got wide open spaces, if that's what you like, well, go ahead and apply for your Wyoming license. So, you sort of build all this up. So when you say your residency is done, if that's what you want to do post, residency to kind of feel your way as a new graduate, or when you're going to retire from your permanent position, at age 65, but you're not ready to, sit on the porch in the rocker yet, and you still want some assignments, line all that stuff up so that when you're ready, all the procedural things are ready.
Okay, well, you just alluded to something again that's in the book here, and that's the way you sort of categorize maybe the three major types of physicians in terms of their. I think it has to do more with the position they are or the time they are in their career. So why don't you expound on that a little bit before we go on?
Well, one of the things I've heard you say is, people go into medicine on a decision they made when they were 16, and then they're
Right.
35, and they're different. The world is different. And they may find themselves, treading water and trying to sort out what's what. So I think it's similar, as we sort of progress through life, your needs change and who you are becomes more refined. So when I thought about it, I realized there's really three categories of people. There are those just finishing their residency or fellowship. Some of them know exactly what they want to do. I'm going to join my, buddy's practice, and I want to live near
Hmm.
my parents. And I mean, I've talked to fellows, and then one guy, boy, he had everything lined up. I mean, he even had the in-laws ready to babysit for the baby they didn't have yet. I mean, this guy
That's planning.
had it all worked out. And then you talk to others and say, well, what do you want to do? It's like, well, I kind of like everything. I don't really know. And you want to live in a big city like, San Francisco, or do you want to be in a rural area? You want to join a clinic, a hospital, academics, so there's geography, there's style. And it's like, well, I don't really know. And it's like, well, are you comfortable with your clinical skills? Because, when you do locums, you could be the only guy. And I
Right.
actually did that once. I was the only ER doc, and I was not really that well trained for that job. That
Oh,
was a pretty stressful year. I had a lot of books and I made a lot of phone calls, and I don't think I killed anybody, but it was a lot of responsibility at that time. So you got to be if you're going to try it after residency.
yeah.
Then the other thing is a lot of residents graduating, they may have a significant other also in medicine or law school, and they're a year or two behind. So now they've graduated, but they don't really want to start their permanent career
Hmm.
because they're going to have to move probably. And then what about the other one? So they might want to just kind of, feel their way, experiment a little bit, without sort of making a big move. And then when the other one's ready, they can both go together. So it's a way of
Right.
kind of stalling that first permanent job. And also explore geography. Where do I want to live? Some people have always sort of trained and went to medical school and residency all in the same place. And it's like, what about
Yeah.
California? When I finished medical school, it's like, I'm going to California. I mean, that's where the Beach Boys were, scuba diving there. I grew up in the Northeast. California was really just kind of a fantasy world for me. So I went. And so then there's mid-career guys. They're 45, 50 years old. They're well established in their practice. Things are pretty good, not perfect, but certainly good enough. They've got 3 kids. They've got a house. They've got a vacation house. And all of a sudden, they don't really have enough money.
Oh.
And it's like, or maybe they got divorced, or maybe they got sick, or maybe they're having to support a relative, or maybe the stock market didn't cooperate, or all of a sudden, they're 10, 20%, their cash flow really needs a little boost. And
Mm.
so it's possible to take your vacation time and work 2 weeks locums, usually out of town because you may have a non-compete. So you got to
Right.
pay attention to that. And it's also just a chance to try it out, but you can make, 5, 10, 15, $20,000, in a block. And that might just be enough to hold off the creditors and make life go, pay the braces and, the kids'
Yeah.
tuition and move on. So, and it might be a consideration. So they're mid-career guys. Also, the other mid-career is kind of a backup transition plan. Like you've got the mid-career, and I've had it, and I want to do something different. I'm going to build this business at home. I'm going to sell real estate. I'm going to start a restaurant. I've got a new algorithm that's going to make fortune on the stock market, whatever it is. But there's always a startup time.
Mm. Yeah.
Could be a month, could be 6 months, could be 18 months before that new idea either realizes itself or not. So by working locums, you can still maintain your clinical identity, still continue an income, work on that other career. And then if it bottoms out and never materializes, well, you haven't been away from medicine, and you can
Right.
either apply for another permanent position or continue. Because, once you're out for 2 years because of malpractice insurance, can't get back in because nobody can write a letter for you on your clinical skills in the last 2 years because you had no clinical events in the last 2 years. And it's a
Yeah.
catch-22 that I didn't know about years ago. And I write about it in my book because you think, oh, I've got my license, I've got my CME, I read, I go to conferences. Doesn't mean anything. Without having hands-on paid volunteer work doesn't even count.
Mm.
So for the mid-career guy, locums is a way of not cutting the cord. And if you want to get out. And then there's the pre-retirement guy, 65, 67, 68. It's like, I love medicine. I've been doing it all my life. I finally got good at it, but I don't want to work 80 hours a week anymore.
Right.
So they go to their partners and say, I don't want to. I had this discussion actually with Corey Fawcett, who's written a lot of financial books for doctors. And he told this story. He said, I was not really ready to retire, but I wanted to slow down. I wanted to develop my other career. So I went to my partners and I said, I want to cut back. I want to work 3 days a week. He said, sure, fine. But you got to pay 100% of the overhead because the overhead doesn't go away.
Oh, yeah.
So he cut back. I don't know if you remember if it was exactly 3 days a week, but the idea he was part-time.
Yeah.
And one day he said to his wife, he said, you know what? I'm not earning any money. He says, every dollar that I earn just pays the overhead.
Right.
So I'm not earning anything. And it's like, well, that's not really fair. But his partners thought it was fair. That was something I learned also when I tried to work part-time in a highly structured. What's fair is definitely in the eye of the beholder.
Mm-hmm.
And so for pre-retirement guys, they may not have the option of slowing down.
Right.
And also, if you slow down, I've seen this also, a very distinguished older guy, kind of slowing down a little bit, not respected anymore, not viewed as a contributor. He's golfing, people see him coming in late, going home early, don't get the respect. And that can be very painful for somebody who's dedicated their whole life and still sees themselves contributing, where the younger guys see you as dead weight. And that's not fun. So another approach is you retire in glory. Thank you for your 30 years. You get your watch, and your engraved pen. And then you say, I want to continue teaching. I want to continue doing surgeries. I want to continue, but I want to do it on my own terms, maybe 6 months a year. That's perfectly doable as a locums physician. And you maintain your income, you maintain your identity, and you can do it as long as you can do it. I mean, in fact, locums companies like older physicians
All right.
because they're trained. They've learned that, there's more than one way to skin a cat. You got to be flexible where you go. And they've acquired some people skills usually by that time.
Mm-hmm.
And, if I apply for a new job today, I'm going to be 65 next month. I think my, employer, they're just going to raise an eyebrow. They won't say anything, right? Because it's against the law. But it's like, well, gee, how long is this guy? We're going to have to make a big investment in him. How long is he really going to help our organization? We're going to be paying, his sick leave and his retirement in 2 years.
Right.
Locums companies don't care about that because that's not their problem. That's your problem.
Right.
Well, if you want to work, you work. If you're not working, you're on your own. So you have a huge amount of freedom and self-determination that you've earned as a senior guy.
Yeah.
So I think I recommend it to pre-retirement guys who aren't ready to retire. If I'm at a university setting, and so I'm kind of hoping they'll accommodate me, as I become more feeble, but no guarantee of that.
Yeah.
And private practice, not very accommodating. So it's a wonderful option because, some guys go into retirement. This is not unusual. I'm 65, it's time to retire. They retire and they go crazy because whatever else they do in retirement, things they've always wanted to do, play golf, meet with their friends, read more books, exercise, go on a cruise. Medicine, it still doesn't compare to making life and death decisions and hearing intimate stories from your patients. It's getting out of the house also, it's, relationships change, right? When you're home all day.
Yeah.
So some of those guys go back into practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, even, they've moved to Florida or whatever. It's like, hire me somebody, please, or they'll volunteer. So locums can work for them, and you can do it for a year and say, oh, okay, I'm ready now. I've had enough. And there you go. So the flexibility and the lack of commitment, you commit to your assignment for the week or month or 6 months or whatever it is, and then it's over. And there's no harm, no foul if you don't want to do another one.
Now I've heard you talk about another benefit or positive, and I think it relates to what you were just talking about is that, and you can expound on this, but they're usually happy to see you.
Oh, yes. That's so unexpected. And every place I've been, oh, Dr. Wilner, we're so glad you're here. And I figure, oh, well, it's because, my reputation, they've read my papers. It has nothing to do with it. It's like they're overwhelmed, and there you are, a warm body. And you're going to see, when I went to the Mayo Clinic, they had a 6-month wait for their general outpatient medicine clinic. Wow. And so I showed up, I had my schedules wide open. So they were able to reduce that to 2 weeks. Patients would come in, oh, Dr. Wilner, it's so wonderful that you're here.
Yeah.
It's like, well, of course, I'm the expert. But no, otherwise I had to wait 6 months to see somebody, and here you are. And then my colleagues, my new colleagues, it's like, oh, thank God somebody's seeing all those patients. Stop harassing me. About going to clinic. I want to do my research. I don't want an extra clinic day, and then they paid me very well, which is the norm. And so, I mean, it's win-win for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask a different question now, but before we do that, your website, we can get your book on your website, right? At
Yes.
www.andrewwilner.com. Is that the best place?
andrewwilner.com. Everything is there. That's the best place to go. You can email me there. You can leave a voice message. You can see all of my books. And also I have a new video program and a podcast. And you can see samples of those there. And it's called The Art of Medicine. And those are a lot of fun too. So please
Now,
come to my website.
is there an easy way to see or to listen to The Art of Medicine? Is it just on the website, or is it like on a podcast, streaming like iTunes or something?
Yeah, great question. So I started it as a video kind of interview blog, kind of like what we're doing. And then I realized, a lot of people don't like to sit and watch, including me.
Right.
So now it is an official podcast, and it's on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play.
Okay.
You just go to those, search The Art of Medicine with Dr. Andrew Wilner, and there's already several episodes archived, and it's going to come out every other Sunday. So I've already got it programmed through, today's April 3rd, already programmed through May. So yeah, please listen and send feedback and help me develop a great show.
Okay, we'll do that. All right, let's talk about agents and agencies again. You touched on it a little bit, but I don't know. You said we should at least start with an agency, maybe later not use an agency once we learn a little bit. But what are some of the things we need to know about working with an agency?
Right. So it's, again, there's a whole chapter in the book. And frankly, my first locums in 1982 in an ER, I didn't use an agency. It was an ER that a lot of the residents used to moonlight. So I just called somebody up and they said, yeah, okay, and here's your shift. And it was kind of informal. I don't even know if we had a contract, but I got paid and it was great. Well, that was a long time ago, and things have gotten a lot more formalized. So the agencies, in the book, I liken them to a real estate agent.
Okay.
You want to buy a house. So you can just talk to the seller. Right. And you can give them $300,000 and they give you the title of the house and you're done. But somehow there's a lot more ins and outs, right? Somebody needs to say, oh, Dr. William, before you give them the money, you probably ought to get the house inspected. You probably ought to check the comps. Maybe you're paying too much. So, the staffing agent, this is what they do all day long. And you don't pay them. The seller, the client who's hiring you, pays so there's no money out of your pocket. I mean, just like the real estate agent, they'll get a cut, of the deal, but it doesn't come out of your pocket directly. And I also make the point, there are big staffing agencies like Comp Health, that's the oldest one, Staff Care, there's Pacific something. I mean, there's over 100 of them, and they're listed in the book. Right. And it's because it's pretty easy to be a staffing agent. You just got to, line up the clients and you line up the doctors, and there you are. But what's more important than the actual name, like Century 21, is the agent that you deal with. You have, and Comp Health has 3,000 employees. They've got a lot of agents. So it may be the first person you talk to doesn't really get it. They need to understand who you are, what you're really trying to achieve. And you need to kind of, and sometimes that all comes out. If you get a good agent, you'll sort of toss that around and say, well, Dr. Wilner, what do you really want to do here? What, you want to work 2 weeks? You want to work 2 months? You want to work 2 years? Do you really want to relocate or not? You got to kind of process all of that so that when you do get your position, at least it's close to what you actually wanted. So you don't pay the staffing agent. They do their own credentialing. They will assist you in your state license and hospital credentialing, and they'll pay your state license. They'll probably pay your DEA as well. They don't mind paying for everything because they're going to earn from you. And and every day you work, they get a penny. And so if you work, particularly if you come back to them when your assignment is over and say, Angie's one of my agents, and say, Angie, I was a great assignment, set me up for next October. Angie is delighted because now she's going to get, and that's what they want. They want repeat customers. And a lot of positions are actually repeat. You've got these hospitals in North Dakota, they cannot retain anybody. It snows, they're gone. There's nothing to do except shovel snow in North Dakota. And they can't keep physicians. So the locums position is sort of continuous. And so guys will do it for 6 months or a year. I've had enough. And then, now they need another guy for another year. And they're going to pay well because otherwise nobody's going to go. And there are people who need doctors. So it's important. You can even have more than one staffing agent. Your contract with the staffing agent is not exclusive.
Hmm. Okay.
So and that's important. And the agents know that. I mean, they obviously want you to have an exclusive relationship, but say you're looking for a very particular kind of position. I don't. You're a hospitalist. You want to be in a community hospital. Well, the positions offered by staff care may not be exactly the same as the ones offered by Comp Health. I use those as examples. So Comp Health may have something, but staff doesn't. You know, there's no, one of the difficulties of the locum tenens world, there is no master list of positions. It's just like permanent positions. You know, there's the AAN career, guide for neurologists, where a physician, but there's no one place you can go and say, what are all the positions available today for a neurologist looking for a job? There's just different bulletin boards here and there and different recruiters. It's an incredibly inefficient, system.
Right.
So the staffing agency, and they develop a little bit of a bad rap because, they're paid on commission. So as soon as you call a staffing agency, you will guaranteed hear from them again. You're going to get emails, you're going to get phone calls, because that's how they live.
Right.
And, you can just say, thanks, don't call me anymore. And they won't after you tell them a few times. But because that's really how they live. Excuse me. I encourage them to call, and to send emails, because I want to know what's available. I want to know, if I want to work in Wisconsin, or I want to go back to South Dakota where I also had, is stuff popping up there? So I like to kind of keep my thumb on the pulse of what's happening in the industry. But they know you're looking at other places. And but they feel if they do a good job, why would you go somewhere else? Why wouldn't you come back to them? And I think they're right. And I've tended to use the same agencies, over and over. But that didn't prevent me. My Mayo Clinic job, for example, was a colleague. We were both lecturing at a conference, and we were chatting. And he said, we just had 3 neurologists quit. Whoa. And we kind of need somebody. And I said, well, maybe we could work something out. And we did. Nice. And that worked well, I think, in part because the Mayo Clinic is not a shoddy operation. I did not have to worry that they're not going to pay me, or they're not going to pay my malpractice. They're really, they dot their I's and cross their T's. It can be a little bit of a nuisance sometimes, but you're not going to get into trouble with them. And so I figured, well, that's a good bet. I'll just skip the agency and work directly with them. And it worked out great. I've been very lucky, I think, that in part because I do prepare myself. And also, I also prepare myself for kind of the worst case scenario. So if you show up at a locum tenens position, they need you, right? So if they need you, there's a reason they don't have a permanent person. It's either because that person died or went on vacation, but more likely it's because they can't hire anybody because there's too many patients, or not enough patients, or not enough help, or the facility is, in the middle of nowhere. Or, there's something that isn't ideal. You're not going to a perfect hospital in the perfect city, with perfect restaurants. That's just not the way it's going to be. So if you prepare yourself, this is not going to be ideal, then it's always been better than I expected. Okay. So I don't have any complaints.
All right, let's switch to another question. What about liability coverage? Is it always provided by the contracting facility? Do you have your own malpractice coverage? How do you handle that?
Right. So number one, you must have malpractice insurance. In my opinion, right? There are guys that want to go without. I don't want to go without.
Yeah.
So you must have it. If you have a permanent position, like I do, I have a permanent job. I go to this, and I wanted to work locums on the side. My malpractice that I already have and already pay for will not cover my locums. So don't assume that it will. You must have a separate policy. I mean, it seems obvious, but you might just assume, have I already got insurance? No, you need a separate policy. If you work with a staffing agency, it is industry standard that they will provide the standard, usually the minimum 1 million, 3 million, or whatever that state requires, they will provide it. And I've never had any trouble with that. And you need to ask them, I need the face sheet. It's a one page that says you were covered from this date for that date, and these are the limits, and this is the company. Because when you apply for another job somewhere down the line, they're going to say, hey, we need to see continuous malpractice insurance, because they don't want to gap something they might be assuming without realizing. So I collect these things, and that's not something they're going to send you. It's not part of the pack. You have to specifically ask for it. You might have to ask for more than once, because they know they did it, but that's the other office that's doing it. Your agent doesn't really have anything to do with that. But right. You have to do, again, you're a self-employed individual. You got to make sure you're following all the business rules. And one of them is to make sure you've got documentation that, you're paying your taxes quarterly, you're insured, that there's money in your account. So, things are working properly. You check. Most of them actually have a direct deposit now. So that's great. All you have to do is log on. They've all got their own sites. You put in your hours, and a week later, bang, you can see that the deposit's made. If it's not made, you give them a call right away. So you're on top of that. They'll pay expenses of all your travel, your living expenses. One of them even paid gas when I was on assignment. So you turn in your little, gas receipt from the gas station. So, because that's a different budget. That's not your, well, you work as a CMO, the hospital has all these budgets. They might have $1 million in this bucket, for the CEO's redecorating their office, but to hire another lab tech, no, there's nothing in that budget. It doesn't work that way. So, staffing agents are big organizations typically, and they have their budget. So they don't mind paying expenses. And they just pass them on. That's a pass through back to the client. So it may not cost them anything. So it's like, the other thing, you can negotiate. They say, okay, $100 an hour. And you say, well, I want 125. What do you think? Agent will say, well, I'll ask. Because they're going to get a cut. So if the client's willing to pay 125, that's another $5 for them, every hour. So, on the other hand, they may say, Dr. Wilner, we're already kind of at the maximum. I've worked with that client before. They're not really, they're not flexible. And, they may just go with somebody who's cheaper. So, whenever you negotiate, you have to keep in mind that you can lose the negotiation just as well as you can, win it. So you have to keep, but there's always another job. So, you set the price, right? That's the advantage of being your own boss. It's like, I'm not going to work there unless I get 125. They say, sorry. Like, okay, next.
You're not working.
Not working. And, you may not find another one for 6 months, or you might find another one the next day. So that's part of the thrill.
Another annoyance potentially. How bad is it these days in learning a new EMR every time you have to change? Or are they all on Epic at this point? I mean, how does that go?
Well, years ago, I wrote a blog, an Epic catastrophe, because I was I'd been trained for 2 days on Epic, but I was in the emergency room. I was the one that had to enter everything, and I had to put in the medicines and reorder them, which was a different set of screens. And I didn't know how to do it. So the patient's sitting there. I got new consults coming. I can't admit the patient. So I asked the ER guys, can you help me? And they go, no, we don't do that. We don't admit patients, so we don't know how to do it either. I had to call IT. An IT person drove to the hospital at 10 o'clock at night and showed me how to do it. It was a disaster. So about 50% of the hospitals in the country are on Epic. So and a lot depends on you. If you're kind of, if you haven't grown up with this stuff and you don't know how to use it, and there's no nurse practitioner or scribe or so, and you're going to be on your own, you have to try and learn as much as you can before you go. I've insisted on having Epic training. I said, I'm not starting until you train me. I want 2 days of training, and they'll pay you.
Okay.
They'll pay you.
Curious about that.
because, it serves them. You can say, look, if I can't work,
Right.
what, and if that's too hard for you, I think that's a real big consideration. If learning a new EMR is something that is like learning a foreign language for you and you're not adept. Of course, once you know it, like I learned Epic, and it can be very frustrating how did it work? Yeah, I think when I was at the Mayo Clinic, we used Cerner, and then they went to Epic, and then we went, and then somebody else Cerner. So they switch around. But I found Cerner and Epic are almost interchangeable.
Okay.
I mean, I think a day, if you know one, the other one is not going to be too tough. Those are, I mean, I can't even tell the difference if you sat me down in front of it, which one is got their little message section, and you type your notes and your templates. But it requires some preparation, your template, your dot codes, your signature, all those things, take a while to do. And what happens is you're halfway through the note and it's like, okay, I need to order an MRI. It's like, I don't know. There's 14 different MRIs. It's on a different screen. You got to check the creatinine. How do I get back there? So the ideal thing is to get somebody to sit next to you. And I actually did that at the Mayo Clinic. I had somebody sitting next to me while I did my first few patients, because each new thing you get stuck. Now, not every facility will provide that, but I think that is a real consideration, because if you can't function, with the EMR these days, you're paralyzed.
Yeah.
So that is something you got to sort out ahead of time.
Good to know. Now, in your book, you mentioned there's I think a chapter called Strategies for Success. And I think you probably hit on a lot of them as we've looked at some of the barriers. But I know, can you think of other strategies for success? Be a good planner, plan out 6 months to a year. What are some of the other strategies? Be a nice guy.
Yeah. Well, I kind of enjoyed that chapter because I probably did not employ all those strategies when I started out. And I think I would have a much larger house and bank account, and I would have been happier if I'd read that chapter 40 years ago, because they really matter. And what you just said, be nice. If you're a cardiovascular surgeon, it's like, well, why should I be nice? I got this skill set. I'm saving lives. But that's what people see. This new guy shows up, and all they remember, in fact, what patients remember, because they don't know how many weekends and nights you sacrificed to learn the Krebs cycle and study and read the New England Journal. They don't see that. They say, oh, that Dr. Wilner, he was really nice. Yeah. They remember that. And the staff, I've had staff, I've kind of heard them refer patients to me because they watched me with another patient. They said, wow, that Dr. Wilner, he's really nice to his patients. I'm going to send him my girlfriend, who has migraines or something. Yeah. And I learned that is the most important quality. It really, if you're not nice, you've got a mountain to climb, to overcome just to get. So being nice is easy. So that part of that is the 3 A's, right? Okay. The 3 A's of success, which I heard about, I think, when I was a resident, and it probably applies to, every kind of entrepreneurial business. But the first A and the most important A is affability. Just be a nice guy. Just be nice to people, be approachable, listen to people. You don't have to say much. In fact, the more you say, the dumber you are. Be quiet, just listen. Second A, availability. You got to show up. Yeah. And that has to do when the staffing agent calls you and says, Dr. Wilner, there's this new opportunity in Florida. It starts next week. Well, my kid has their blah, 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 and my wife. It's like, well, you're not available. It's going to somebody else. Right. If you want to succeed, you got to prioritize. You got to say, wow, next week, that's great. I'm already packed. I can't wait to go. They love it. So you have to be available. And that also has to do with being on the job. You know, you show up. I used to fly in the day before I had to be there, even if I had to pay the hotel, because, you know, you're a traveler. I mean, half the time the flights are canceled. You're going to show up late. I want to show up, get the lay of the land, do a practice run to the hospital. Where do I park? Where do I go? How long is it going to take me? Where's the restaurant? You know, where's the gym? You know, kind of get squared away. So when it's Monday morning, 8 o'clock, I'm there at 5 of 8 and I'm all ready to go. So availability really counts. And then the last most important thing, I mean, I used to think it was the most important thing and the only thing, but it's part of the three, is ability. You got to know what you're doing. And although you could probably work as a neurologist for months before anybody had a clue whether you knew what you were doing or not, you know, it's so obscure. But that's a big help because people recognize that. Your colleagues will see in your notes, it's like, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. You know, that makes sense. You know, you write a clear note or you give the guy a call, you say, okay, this is what we need to do here. And it's like, wow, he knows what he's doing. That's great. So you'll get more referrals and the whole people will enjoy working with you because it's like, you know, I remember I worked one place and I quickly identified that one of the radiologists had no idea what he was doing.
Oh boy.
The other guys were all good. You know, he wasn't terrible, but he missed stuff. And it's like, so I just kind of avoided him, you know, when I could because he wasn't helping me and he wasn't helping my patients, you know, and not everybody is as good as everybody else.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, even within medicine, even if people are capable, there are doctors who are better than others. And you want to be working with the guys who are the best because you want them to help you make the right decisions. So here's another easy guide to success because being able is tough. That's training and studying and working hard and paying attention and showing up. But dress. Dress for success. I still think that it matters. You show up with a long sleeve shirt like what I'm wearing now. You wear a tie, usually a white coat or a sport coat, and you know, some kind of business casual works these days. But you know, you show up in a t-shirt, you know, in shorts and sneakers, you don't look like the doctor. And you may be the most capable, you know, you won the Nobel Prize for prion disease or whatever, but you don't look like the doctor. And you know, most patients are older, you know, they're not millennials, and how you dress is the first thing that people notice about you. And, you know, if you want to have, you know, green hair on one side, purple hair on the other, it's a fashion, that's okay. I mean, you can do whatever you want these days, but you're going to pay a price. You know, once people get to know you and say, wow, Dr. Wilner is brilliant. His hair's a little funny, but he is a brilliant guy. But you're going to have to overcome it. So, you know, women, you know, for them, there's a lot of options on how to dress. And they have to think carefully, what do I want to project? And what you want to project is that you're a professional and nobody really notices what you're wearing. That, to me, that's, you know, that your clothes are invisible. You know, you just look the part. And I think when you go to a new locums, all they're going to notice is how does this guy dress and is he nice? Yeah. And they may not realize whether you know what you're doing until you're long gone. You know, it may take a long, long time. I mean, I think these are simple things for any job. You know, you're a millennial, you just graduated college, you get your first job at the accounting firm or on Wall Street. You know, you buy a $500 suit, maybe a $1,000 suit these days, I don't know, and nice shoes. And you show up on time and you say hello to the secretary, you know, and you say hello to the elevator guy, if they still have elevator guys. You know, you just be nice to everyone. I have found it's magic. I wish I had discovered that when I was starting out. It is magic.
That's very important. So that's good to know. And it's a good reminder in anything that we're doing, you know. You know, I want to ask you a question because I don't know if we're in the beginning or the middle of the COVID, let's say we're in the middle of a pandemic. I have a feeling like this is not going to be the last pandemic we're going to see. So unfortunately, But be that as it may, that has affected the locums, I think you've been talking about that, and I've seen some things online. But so how does that affect what's going on in terms of, doing locums?
I kind of feel like I got to write another book
Oh yeah.
because this has really changed what's going on in a lot of ways, or at least an addendum. Because I researched this recently. I just wrote an article that's not published yet. And it really goes into this in depth because things, just like, pediatricians and dermatologists are closing their offices, right? Outpatient, and the hospitals are, I just heard in my city, they're commandeering some warehouse. Excuse me, I do have a cough, but it's just allergies.
Good. Good to know.
Commandeering a warehouse to put 1,000 beds.
Yeah.
And they're going to have the Army Corps of Engineers do it overnight. Things have really changed. So key to locums is travel.
Yeah.
I used to fly from Phoenix after I finished Mayo Clinic to Minneapolis, St. Paul, where I worked a week on, week off. And every week I'd fly to Minneapolis and then fly back home for a week and fly back. I did that for months and months. You would never consider doing that now. Who wants to get into an airplane?
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, locums has changed. Doctors are looking for assignments closer to home so they can drive, right?
Mm-hmm.
It kills a little bit of time, but the way the airlines are, I tend to drive unless it's really, really far, usually over the ocean. If I don't have to cross an ocean, I'd rather drive personally for, even for my recreational things. I've taken to driving just because the hassle of the airport turns me off, and I've done it so much. So travel has been hugely affected. You got to minimize that. And then the need, right? So surgeons, for example, used to be in big need. Nobody really needs a surgeon anymore because all elective surgeries are canceled.
Yeah.
So on the other hand, hospitalists, ICU doctors, pulmonary doctors, huge demand. I talked to one agent the other day. They said, if you're a pulmonologist, I have a job for you today.
Anywhere, anywhere, yeah.
And if you want to go to New York City,
Oh boy,
I can probably get you more money. And because there is a supply and demand. Most doctors want to do good and want to go where they're needed. The other thing is that a lot of locums physicians actually are over 50. I think the majority. And there are even guys 65. I talked earlier about the pre-retirement. And this agent told me that she had a pulmonologist who was 75 years old.
Whoa.
Who wanted to go to New York to help. And she didn't want him to go. Mm-hmm. Because she knew the guy well for 10 years, had been working with him. She said, well, she had to present, they present your file to the hiring facility, mm-hmm. which is formality usually. But she said she hoped he wouldn't be accepted because he's really putting his life, on the line. But, that's what doctors do. But this is a really extraordinary time. So the locums business for the usual, outpatient clinic staffing, gone. There's also cancellations, like I talked about that 30-day notice. We thought we needed you. We don't need you anymore. And there are actually a few doctors who've said, hey, I don't need this. I'm going home. Who've quit, just walked off the job. Not too many, but a few. It's like, the risk benefit here. I'm getting $1,500 a day for helping out. It's going to pay for my kid's braces, but my kid really needs me, so I'm done. So all of a sudden the equation is a little bit different, and we all pray that this thing will end soon, but it really has had an effect. I mean, on everyone, and locums is really no exception. The locums certainly isn't going to go away. And they still need people, and in particular, they need acute care, specialists. So if you are an acute care specialist, it's a great time to give it a try. If you're willing to put yourself in harm's way, and a lot of us we're in harm's way whether we want to be or not. I'm still going to my normal job, every other week, and I'm trying to, I guess, limit the proximity between myself and potentially contagious patients as much as I can, but I don't know how long I can really, how much I can really do. So we just kind of have to brave it and soldier on.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely something worth thinking about. And as you mentioned earlier, they're also kind of facilitating the acceptance of licenses and so on, and those kind of things that facilitate the transfer of physicians to
Oh yeah, I
other
forgot
states
to
now.
mention it, right? The hassle factor um, is severely diminished. Although the agent said that they actually hadn't used that too much.
Really?
I guess they had enough people who were credentialed in the appropriate states that they hadn't really started using it. I was surprised to hear that. But yeah, a lot of the states are creating what they call a waiver. That as long as you're a licensed physician and you're in good standing, blah, 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 and you want to help with COVID, come on over.
Yeah.
So that has changed. So I don't think you're going to find too many obstacles to getting a job, if you're an acute care person. If you want to work at a pediatric outpatient clinic, you're not going to get a job.
Right.
Maybe Indian reservation or something.
Yeah. At least not for a while. All right. Well, going back to the overview of the whole thing. So ideally, so someone's thinking about this, they're following the advice you've provided, and what do you think, what is their life going to then be like? I mean, let's say that they feel they're a good planner, they're flexible, they can do the travel. So what do you think they're going to feel like in terms of their satisfaction and their, I don't know, because we want to love our work. I mean, what's been your experience?
Well, my experience, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I have a lot of outside passions. I've been a writer since, 13 years old, and I've always struggled to find time to write. And I'm also a very dedicated physician. If it's a question of am I going to write a poem or am I going to read the latest article in the New England Journal? I mean, I'll always read the article in the New England Journal because I feel I owe that to my patients and I owe it to myself to be, the best doctor that I can be. And then you've got a full schedule and, I have to sleep too. So I found that when I was in a conventional practice for 8 years,
Mm-hmm.
I really was frustrated personally in many ways. And through a series of events, I found myself with options. And I started doing locums, and I just couldn't believe it. It's like, wow, I can work for 3 months, and I was single. I try not to overspend, so 3 months would actually support me for 6 months.
Hmm.
So I could take the next 3 months and go to Southeast Asia and, travel through the jungle stuff, I'd always wanted to do since I was a kid. And I did it once and I said, I think I'm going to do it again. And, it's fantastic because on the other hand, there was another locums doctor who I knew, who I followed up, she left and I took the spot. She worked 31 days a month. Soon as she finished one assignment, she was starting the next one the next day because she wanted to maximize her income. And if you want to do that, if you can work 365 days a year, there's no law against it. And you can have a pretty good income. For me, having discretionary time, I like to throw myself into whatever I do. So if I'm working, like on my 7 days on, I'm 100%. That's what I'm doing. And my 7 days off, I still check my emails and stuff at work, but try and focus on writing and my other endeavors. And so all of a sudden I would have a 3-month block. It's like, wow.
Nice.
And so if you want, and I did that for 10 years and it was fantastic. And the only reason I stopped doing it as my life evolved, I became a little less independent. I got married. I had a baby. And it's like, well, I don't really want to be flying here, flying there.
Right.
And my income had to sort of catch up with, bigger grocery bill.
Yeah.
But, now as I'm approaching the pre-retirement phase, I don't know really when that is, I continue to stay active in the locums world because I see that as an option. I can continue working, till I'm 100 if I want to. with my clinical skills as long as I'm healthy and do good. I think it's important to care for people. And, you learn every day as a physician. So you don't want to, certainly those skills are transferable, but it's nice to, the models. I heard one of your interviewees use this term, the pictures of the doctors on the wall, those guys we aspired to be. And, and I had forgotten about that, but I really did aspire to be like those guys when I was in training. They benefited from really a lifetime of experience. That's how they got so good. Well, the world has changed, and there aren't going to be pictures on the walls like that, I think, anymore, for the most part, because the system just doesn't reward that kind of dedication anymore. There'll be a few.
Yeah.
But, a lifetime of experience is irreplaceable, whether you're a writer, or a newscaster or whatever you do. There's no way for anybody to catch up, when they're 22. They just can't compete with a 62-year-old guy who's done it for 40 years.
Right.
They may have their own talents and skills, but, experience really is something that you can't fake it.
Right.
You can't fake it. So I'm not ready to sort of toss that in the drawer yet.
Are there any professional societies or organizations that cater to locums? I've never heard of one, but does it exist?
That is an excellent question and very timely. So there is the National Association of Locum Tenens Organizations, NALTO.org. But NALTO.org is sort of a industry group of locum tenens agencies that kind of banded together to promote themselves. And they set up a code of ethics, and you have to become a member. And if you're a member, it means you're a good organization. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think they're a nonprofit. They have meetings. And I've had some interactions with them. And they say if you're going to pick an agency, you might as well pick one that's NALTO certified. I think that's reasonable. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that if they're not NALTO certified, that they're not a good agency. And I know of one very good agency that isn't, actually more than one. But I've actually been approached recently to set up an association of locum tenens physicians.
Yeah,
because there is no, in fact, I ran into this when I marketed the book, because there's actually no target sort of organization of locum tenens physicians or locum tenens nurses and PAs. Does not exist. There are about 50,000 locum tenens physicians in the U.S. Practicing today. So it's a not insignificant number. And, but they're so diverse, right? There's the pre-retirement guys, there's the graduate guys, there's guys that do a week a year, there's people that do it full time. Then they're self-employed, so they're independent, thinkers. They're not the kind, they're not, just your employee that's going to join an organization and everybody's kind of lockstep. It's just the opposite. So how an organization could evolve that would address their needs and help them actually is something I've been thinking about. There's a few people that sort of are motivated to do this, and I'm not sure what structure it would take or, how it would really help, if it's a good idea or not. And of course, it has to be sustainable. It's got to sustain itself, and it creates a bureaucracy, and, have a newsletter and meetings. And so I don't know yet, but it's an interesting, I think as locums continues to grow, it may just be that there is going to be a sort of a groundswell that just like these Facebook groups kind of, create themselves, out of nothing. And then, there's a need there. So if there were an organization, it would be interesting, how many people would really join it. And I think it is growing because there is a disillusionment with the employment model.
Right.
Particularly now, I've been stunned to see that there are, respectable employers like Beth Israel Hospital was in the news in Boston, which is a highly regarded hospital, and has their physicians on a bonus plan, which is on the presumption that there are more than enough patients to see. so that if you're willing to work a little harder, you're going to get a bonus. It was never really factored in that if there weren't enough patients to see, that you're going to be penalized. But that's what they're doing. They're saying, well, you guys aren't really producing, so you're not going to get your bonus, which was always assumed. It was not really it's like the expected Christmas bonus.
Yeah.
And another organization I saw, well, we're not going to match your 401k. Things are tough. So we're not going to match so as an employee, which since 2016, more than 50% of physicians now are employees. That's the first time that ever happened. I mean, you are totally vulnerable to the whim of all you can do is leave. Well, where are you going to go? Well, some of them are going to go to Locum Tenens, and some of them will go across the street. I think it's terrible that physicians who are, putting their lives on the line at the same time, this is great, you're a hero, and at the same time they're getting their salaries cut. It's like, thank you very much. But that's why physicians became physicians in the first place, because they wanted to be self-employed, because they didn't want to be at the whim of a corporate, employer. I mean, when I grew up, you could be an attorney, could be a doctor, or maybe an engineer, but you wanted to be an architect. You wanted to employ yourself, so you weren't at the whim of somebody who might discriminate against you because of your sex or your age or your religion. You wanted to carry out your own business. But as physicians have sort of been swallowed up, by the kind of changes in medicine, they've lost that independence.
Right. And many of them want it back, which means you're going to be very busy in the sense that people are going to read your book and they're going to be contacting you to learn more from you, I think. So I'm going to remind everybody that the website is www.andrewwilner.com. And then you told me that you are also willing to, if people are interested, to do a 15-minute consult with you, and whether they then go on to use you to help maybe mentor them or coach them or teach them or consult with them on how to make that transition into locums. Is that?
Absolutely. I give away a lot of free advice. People write to me. I always write them back. So I figured, well, I'll formalize it. 15 free minutes, we can talk. And then, if you want me to help you sort of through it, I'm happy to do that, and we'll do that on a case by case basis. But I think it's very important, and one of my motivations for the book, I respect physicians. They've worked hard, and I think physicians should be happy. And if locums is for you, you should do it. And if it's not for you, you should become the COO of some big corporation, make lots of money. So you got to do what's right for you and figure that out.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you again for being here, because a lot of people are just going to learn from this, both on the podcast and in the academy. The book, awesome book, well written by an expert writer, author who's been writing all his life. And you can get that at the site at andrewwilner.com. I think you put that in, it'll get there. And so with that, I really want to tell you that I appreciate you coming on and being part of my academy and my helping people, and you're just helping more people with this education about locums. So I really appreciate it, Andrew.
John, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, and somehow I always get happy when I talk about locums. It's always fun, and so it's been an enjoyable time for me as well.
All right. Well, with that, then we will stop this particular lesson, and we'll catch up again in the near future. Good to be with you today.
Thank you.